patients, an old mansion for the sisters, was dilapidated. The Louisiana air was so thick and humid you could grab it in your hands. Sister Benedicta knew that their biggest challenge was not leprosy, but the mosquitoes that flourished around them, and an unpredictable water supply. A few months earlier, her predecessor, Sister Beatrice Hart, had died from malaria and exhaustion. In the spring of 1902, conditions were only getting worse, and Sister Benedicta decided to go to New Orleans to confront members of the Louisiana Leper Home Board of Control in person. The men balked at her request for more funds, but she would not back down. "Gentlemen, I shall be at St. Vincent's Infant Asylum until 4 o'clock this afternoon," she told them. "If at that hour I have not heard from you, I shall make public appeal through the newspapers. The people of New Orleans will not tolerate having the sisters care for the lepers without even water to keep them clean." Her ultimatum worked. Money was approved for a water plant and for the construction of new cottages for the patients. It was a decisive moment for a home that would eventually become one of the leading leprosaria in the world, where thousands of Americans would be confined with both miraculous and tragic results. Among those who would end up there was Morris Kolnitsky, who spent years in New York concealing his disease as he fought both its debilitating symptoms and centuries of superstition. His teenage son would come home from school one day to find that his father was gone, taken away by public health officials and isolated, not out of medical necessity, but from ignorance and fear. Kolnitsky's son was my father-in-law. He never saw or spoke to his father again, and because of the stigma and shame, kept his father's illness a secret for more than 60 years. This is the story of the thousands of patients, families, and caregivers in the United States who struggled against one of the world's most dreaded and misunderstood diseases. Their enemy was a physical illness, but also a social one. In many ways, the stigma of leprosy was far worse than the disease itself. It would prove far more difficult to cure. The irony is that leprosy, now called Hansen's disease, is one of the least contagious diseases. The overwhelming majority of human beings, 95%, are naturally immune. And for those who are not, leprosy is extremely difficult to contract. Scientists still don't know exactly how the disease spreads, but they do know that it requires prolonged, close contact with the germ. Not one medical worker or staff member at the Louisiana Leprosarium, which eventually became known as Carville, became infected in more than 100 years of operation. While victims can suffer loss of sensation in their hands and feet, leading to crippled limbs and amputation, the disease does not cause skin and fingers to fall off, as many people believe. Some patients go blind or suffer from painful lesions and disfigurement, but many have few obvious symptoms at all. The truth is that for centuries, tens of millions of people around the world have been unnecessarily scorned, isolated, and imprisoned. Fear of leprosy has been largely fear of the unknown, inflamed by biblical depictions of the disease as God's way of punishing sinners, by condemning them to a life of suffering and scorn. The Old Testament instructed that the afflicted be banished and cry, "Unclean, unclean," to warn others to stay away. But in a cruel and unfortunate twist, what was called leprosy in the Bible was almost certainly not that at all, but an assortment of other skin ailments. Still, the myths and misunderstanding persisted, trailing victims down medieval streets, through the pages of literature, into modern-day life. They justified prejudice against immigrants and others whom society feared. Worse, they hindered treatment for what was a painful and disabling disease, and limited efforts to find a cure. During the 20th century, leprosy patients went to Carville to be cared for, and, more often than not, isolated for life. Some arrived